If you like the law of attraction and you liked the movie The Shawshank Redemption, then this might just be the most fascinating video you've ever seen in your life, because it's about how the law of attraction powers the Shawshank Redemption movie. I call it the Shawshank Attraction. Enjoy. Welcome to the Shawshank Attraction, how law of attraction powers the most popular movie ever. I'm so excited you're here to join me on this journey. We're going to have a lot of fun. So first, I'm going to talk about the project itself as a movie. This movie was released in 1994. It's often been the #1 film on IMDb's top 250 movies since 2008. That means, I think, the most searched movies, which is a pretty good indicator of popularity, since 2008. The original budget was $25 million, which means they probably also spent maybe $25 million on marketing. They originally had a low box office result. It only made $16 million in the domestic box office, and the weekend it went wide, it was only the 9th most popular movie that weekend. So there were 8 more movies that people thought were better than this movie when it came out. After that, it got 7 Oscar nominations, which led people to take a second look and say, oh, maybe there's something else here, which added to another $12 million in the box office, and then $58 million overall worldwide. So it was profitable by the end of its run theatrically, which is great and fairly rare. So less than 50% of movies are profitable in their theatrical run. And then in home viewing, it really blew up. You had, and in fact, by the 10th anniversary of its release, the filmmakers were still earning 6-figure residuals. Not all of them, but so the producers were. I would imagine these, Tim Robbins and Morgan Freeman were getting a pretty good deal, lots of residuals, and other people, even the smaller actors probably get, they get a check for $100, $1,000, something here, and they're probably still getting money. Everybody on that movie today, there's probably money still flowing in. This film was shot in an empty prison in Ohio, and it was set in I think Maine, but in the story it was Maine, but in real life they shot it in Ohio. It was an empty prison, but after they shot the movie there, somebody bought that property from the state for $1, turned it into a historical attraction, and now it still brings in $16 million per year, according to Wikipedia. So how did all that happen? What's going on with this movie that makes it so popular, and is bringing in so much good stuff for the people that made it and the people that watch it? Well, let me first start with, I think, why it initially didn't do so well out of the box office. I think there's probably a couple factors, but I think the main factor was this really terrible title. The title for the book, the story that it was based on a Stephen King story called Rita Hayworth and the Shawshank Redemption, which is a great book. It's called Different Seasons, and there's 4 short novellas in it, and they're all great. One of them was turned into the movie Stand By Me, which is another delightful movie, and this one was turned into this movie, one of the most popular of all time. But that original title was terrible, so they at least shortened it. But it was still, it's confusing. People don't understand what the hell it means. People understand what redemption means, generally speaking, but it's not a very plain word. It's a little bit fancy. So that's working against people being attracted to it, right? We're talking about why things are attracting. In general, we're talking about this some of these principles of law of attraction that I've been looking into, and how movies can be more attractive or less attractive. Titles are a very significant choice in terms of how attracted people will be to them. So if it's confusing, if it's unfamiliar, you're absolutely going to undermine the level of attraction. So that's that. And I think that was a significant factor for it getting really a slow start out of the gates. And then people started hearing about the movie and how much people were liking it that did see it. and that overcame the bad title. So probably just would have been probably just as successful, but more successful sooner. And who knows? Anyway, that's that. Okay, let's get into the story. I'm guessing you've already seen the movie, so I'm just touching on the story points here. But it's our friend Andy gets wrongly convicted for double murder. Now, how would he? If we're talking about law of attraction, how would you attract that in your life? Um, well, the way the world works, and certainly storytelling works, is that stories were drawn to listen to stories because people go on this adventure, and the adventure is filled with contrast, and the contrast calls the hero to this experience so that they can learn these amazing lessons, right? So we all have contrast in our lives, and movies are depictions of a hero that's called in contrast and how that hero definitively overcomes the contrast or sometimes doesn't. If it's a tragic movie, they succumb to the contrast and they lose. So that's basically how stories work. And in this particular one, he was in his life, in the character's life, he was, and he later admits that he basically wasn't paying enough attention to his wife. And he attracted her to be that he kind of pushed her away because he wasn't paying enough attention to her, and she attracted another guy. And then, as it turned out, that when they were together, spoiler alert, somebody else actually killed him, but it was pinned on him. So the other thing that's really interesting as we go through this is that Andy, a lot of people think he might be the hero. He's really not quite the hero of the story. He's really the model. He believes in the law of attraction from the beginning, and he believes in it in the end. The story is really about Red, played by Morgan Freeman, who is showing up in many ways as a victim, and he doesn't really believe in this sense of empowerment and law of attraction. And he needs to really, the story, the transformation is about Red learning to believe in the law of attraction as much as Andy does. When new inmates come to Shawshank, they play this game called Fresh Fish, Fresh Fish. So what I think, if to think about this sequence in terms of law of attraction, it's a dark sequence. I mean, here's this guy, Frank Medrano is the actor. Shout out to him because my wife was friends with him, and he does great in the movie. So anyway, he is very upset about being in jail, which is kind of understandable, and he's so sort of keyed into these circumstances. Oh my God, I'm scared. I'm not going to, And what's interesting is that he then attracts a terrible consequence. So the inmates that are already in the prison are betting on who's going to crack first, and Red, bets on Andy, right? And then Andy doesn't crack, and Andy lost some money, and that's part of how they talk about it in the scene. But from a law of attraction perspective, he is so focused. This character, played by Frank, is so freaked out about his change of circumstances, and he's so out of his head, he starts whimpering and crying. He comes out, the guard beats him up, and it actually beats him to the edge of death. And because it happened so late and they couldn't get him to the infirmary, he actually dies. So how we show up in life is very much about law of attraction. And in this case, this is a dark tale of when you show up as a victim and you're going hard in that victim energy, you're attracting really terrible consequences, even more and more contrast, right? So Andy too gets in there, and it's not all rainbows and butterflies. He has this mindset, and there's a great line that Red says at one point, that he kind of walks around like he doesn't even have a care in the world, right? And that's very much law of attraction, as I understand it. That being said, there's people who are predators in this sort of jail. Oh, the other thing is, I want you to think about this jail not so much as a real prison, because you can look at it. It's kind of a cartoonish type prison. But it's a great metaphor for our own sense of our past, how we can be a prison to our own past habits, and not showing up in our life in the way that we really want to. So think of the prison here as a metaphor. So he has these predators in this prison who are trying to beat him up and take advantage of him, sexually assault him. I mean, it's terrible. So, and part of that, I think, in law of attraction theory, would be that as dedicated as he is to this process, to this sort of mindset of law of attraction, even he has some sort of wobble, and was presented in his energy as a target to these guys who took advantage of him. Now, I kind of have a quibble on that. I mean, I think sometimes things that are somewhat random happen, especially if it happens to a larger amount of people. But effectively, it's the same thing. If we go about our lives by uh, with the belief as if everything that happens is an opportunity for us to do something with, it's a more powerful mindset, and we get more of the things that we want in our life. What we certainly don't want to do is go, oh, I've got this bad hand, I've got this bad luck, and then play the victim card, right? Um, in screenwriting theory, you may be interested in that you can use coincidence if it makes things harder for the heroes, for the characters, uh, mostly for the hero. But if it makes it easy, if it's a movie, if in Star Wars they blow up the Death Star, but by coincidence, that's not going to be satisfying. Things can get harder by coincidence, but you want the characters to sort of drive the action, and that's the same thing. It's like you are driving your life. You are making choices, and life responds to your choices. So that's Andy. The Warden is a wonderful character here. He's the antagonist of the film for sure. And what makes him great is that, and a lot of times really good movies will do this. They'll take your theme and your ideas and they'll flip it on its head, and that idea personified will be our villain. So this Warden is often quoting the Bible, which is interesting because uh, in my perspective, Christianity, when seen in the way that it really can be, is really beautiful and overlaps with the law of attraction in a lot of ways. But any religion, any belief system at all, taken to radical degrees, can produce terrible results. So he'll say something like, there's a one quote where it says, "Put your trust in the Lord, but your ass belongs to me," and welcome to Shawshank. Right? So it's a great line, and he. But that trust in the Lord, that trust in the universe, the trust in the source, being open to that, that's actually a really great and positive thought, and that's really the theme of the movie. Is we can't see, if we only are responding to our circumstances right in front of us, we're going to be attracting more of the same, and it might be attracting uh, more contrast. But if we can see beyond that, tap into something bigger, Christians call it the Lord, other people call it other things. Law of attraction calls it source or inner being or something. If we put our faith or our focus on that thing that's bigger, it it gets us through and gets us even more of what we want in our lives. So he's saying the right thing, but he actually shows up in a really nasty sort of filled with venom energy, and he attracts a grim fate in the end. Um, okay, there's the wonderful scene. A lot of people feel like this is their favorite scene. So Andy's working on the roof with his newfound friends, and he takes the risk to give tax advice to the guard, and the guard is just a total a-hole, and even talking to the guard is might get him beat up and in big trouble. But he takes that risk because he realizes, I have an opportunity to help this guy. And not only that, he knows that through this inspired action, if he can help him, that will help in turn help his friends. And specifically, he gives them really good tax advice, um, and then flips it and gets his friends some beers to enjoy on the roof. And what's interesting here is that, again, in theory, our circumstances, for law of attraction theory, our circumstances don't matter. In theory, we'd be happy no matter what the circumstances are. But in truth, especially if you're in prison, to have some free time and some beers on the roof, it was much easier for them to sort of enjoy their existence. And that's what he attracted for his friends by taking that inspired action. And the kicker, of course, is that he doesn't even drink himself. So totally selfless, just for the joy of attracting something awesome in his life for other people. Really beautiful. It also and this is a synchronistic thing, once the guards realize he has value because he showed up in his power and said, look, I am an inmate, but I have the power to give you tax advice. Um, the guards start looking out for him, and they actually, all those people that were assailing him, they beat the crap out of him and they take him away. So he, and that contrast ends up getting taken away synchronistically because he showed up with his power as a tax advisor. Um, Really awesome. Um, what's also interesting is that he wasn't obsessing over this. He wasn't saying what I don't have. He wasn't talking about lack, right? He moved on that inspiration, and in addition to getting the guards on his side, he ends up getting this cushy job as the librarian. So he once he gets that progress, he's like, how can I attract more, right? So he then starts writing a letter to the state to get resources for the prison library. And in this picture, this is actually the advanced library that he got after that he got a bunch of resources. The original library was very small, but he did it persistently over years. He would write these letters once a week and just say, look, we need these resources. And it's the process of him writing the letters. He wasn't attached to the outcome. He just said, there's joy in me asking, and I have the desire to build this library, and I'm going to do it over and over again. And that's it. No attachment to outcome. Whereas most people are like, geez, I've written 5 letters. I've written 2 letters. I've written 1 letter and I didn't get a response. And they think of the lack, right? So he's amazing that way. Oh, there's another wonderful counterexample of sort of counterexample. So this character who's named Brooks, which is my name, which is funny because I don't see it much. He's this charming older inmate, and he gets paroled after 50 years. But at this point, all the people in his life are gone. So he doesn't know what to do out there. So he's become so attached to his circumstances that even when his circumstances were jail and he had, crappy food and he was getting beaten up, this and that for him was more familiar than the outside world and starting over. And he got so overwhelmed on the outside that he ends up killing himself, which is really a fascinating choice because it's, even when we're attached to circumstances, so with these sort of tight grip, our fingernails dug in, we don't. we're giving away so much power, and so he gave away so much power that even when his circumstances got significantly better, and I get it, there's a learning curve of going out and getting into the world, and he didn't like those new circumstances, but still, those circumstances were clearly better, and he was so overwhelmed. Because even the better circumstances were unfamiliar to him, he ended up bringing contrast and then checking out. Suicide plays a really interesting role in this film, and there's some law of attraction people that believe suicide is sort of a choice, and so I'm not seeing it really that way. Well, it's a choice in one sense, but I see it as mostly contrast if somebody's getting to that point. But it's interesting because in the beginning you see Andy having, when his wife and her lover are in the house, he's got a gun and he's drinking, and you think, oh, is this guy going to shoot them? Is he going to shoot himself? What's going on? Later, before he escapes, there's a moment where it's suggested that he might kill himself. In fact, I don't think Andy ever was going to kill himself. His whole mindset is not set that way. It was just a misleading of the audience in a fun way, because the whole movie is about this sense of, they call it hope and despair. But I think those words really, victim energy or power energy. Oh, that's getting back to the suicide thing, is that suicide, I think, often comes from lots of victim energy. And so in general, so that's why I think that's the kind of the way I'm seeing it. So certainly this character, this older inmate, has, I think, lots of victim energy when he kills himself. The storytellers suggest that Andy has that, but he actually doesn't in those 2 cases. And that, for Andy, sets up how powerful his belief is in a really interesting way, because he's sort of like the best example of law of attraction, right? And all of us are represented more by Red, right? Who are like, we kind of believe it or we don't. We believe some aspects of it. We're learning to believe it, that sort of thing. And then in the end, what happens to the warden when they break in? They found out that he's been laundering money and he's about to scheme and he's probably going to go in jail. He kills himself, right? He two is in the end total victim energy and can't handle those potential new shift in circumstances. So Andy, who wrote the state for years, asking for resources, finally pays off. So this is really a beautiful sequence and another favorite for people in this movie. He gets these resources, and part of the resources include this record of this opera, and and it seems like I think up to this point these guys haven't heard actual music for years, right? It's just a heartbreaking thing because music is so beautiful. It's a way of really opening our soul to just a harmony of sounds that really speak deeply to us. So he then takes this opportunity to trick the guard, who was interestingly really happy for him, because they started now liking him because of the way he shows up with power and shares his gifts of tax advice. And he plays the opera not only just for himself, which he probably could have gotten away with. He plays it for the entire prison, and he leans back, and everybody in the prison yard in a very surreal shot, because it's not like because everybody just stops, but which is a great choice from the filmmakers, because it's not that wouldn't really happen. Most people ignore it. Some people would listen or whatever, right? But they have everybody stop, and it sort of indicates this surreal sense of when music really speaks deeply to us, how it's transcendent, right? It transcends reality in a sense. So he does that gift for everybody in the yard, knowing that he's going to get in trouble. And in fact, when they try to come in and break in, what does he do? He reaches over. He's not going to turn it off. He turns it up. It's great. It's great. So turns it up and gives people another, whatever, 10, 20, 30 seconds of peace. And then they break in the door and they throw him into solitary confinement. He gets out of solitary confinement, and he said it was the easiest time he ever did. And they're like, well, how? Again, their circumstances changed. They got so much worse. How did that happen? And because he had the music. And he says, it's in here and it's in here. And he points to his head and he points to his heart, because that's that empowerment. We have that choice no matter what our circumstances are. And our circumstances are metaphorically like his prison or a solitary experience. Obviously, in real prison, it's a lot harder. But he is a model of facing a significant amount of contrast and still feeling like it was easy. Really awesome. Now, as I said before, this movie is really the protagonist of this movie from screenwriting perspective is the protagonist is generally the one that changes the most. Not always, but oftentimes. And in this movie, Red is the one that changes, because he, at one point, once Andy gets out of the hole for that opera stunt, they have this great, very overt discussion about what I think is really victimhood energy versus empowerment energy. The words they use is hope versus despair, which are fine. But I think that it very nicely aligns with these law of attraction terms and ideas. So, Andy's explaining how, look, you show up in empowered in life, and your experience of life itself is better, and you get more of the good things that you want. And this really scares Red, and it scares most people in their life. And in fact, he says, hope will get you killed in a place like this, right? And that's the fear, and that's when we, as children, often created a reality for ourselves, usually based on what was going on in our family life, where it was problematic to show up empowered. It was problematic to have faith in something bigger than ourselves, and this sense of loving synchronicity and embracing the flow of the universe and our place in it. Those sort of ideas tend to get stamped out of, or they tend to be, kids have those things sort of innately, and then they tend to create different realities. As they get older and they get, quote, more serious, right? So Red mentions that he used to play the harmonica at one point, and so as a gift, Andy gives him a harmonica. And what's so beautifully heartbreaking is there's this scene here depicted in this image where he's looking at that harmonica, and I think he might put it in his mouth and like gently maybe play one note, but he never plays it in the movie. And to me, that's the indication of that he had so much fear and he was showing up as a victim that he couldn't even attract and enjoy the joy of playing music. It's such a basic thing to be able to play music, especially as a kid. Because kids don't have. I'm good at music. They want to play it, right? So here's a guy who supposedly was somewhat good at playing harmonica, and it was too scary for him to actually even play, even quietly to himself in the cell. So yeah, that's great. So that is the one that most people basically relate to because he's he starts out totally against the law of attraction, totally against hope. And then in the movie really is a transformation of him learning to embrace it. But in every great movie, it's never easy, right? Because in a real life, it's not, you can, there's bills to pay. There's relationships that shift. There's things that happen where there's a lot of contrast involved. It's not just, now I'm studying law of attraction and snap my fingers and I make, $50 million in the lottery, right? It can happen. But in reality, the momentum of our life is what it is. And we can increase that momentum with law of attraction choices and get more and more of that. But it's actually, if it's too abrupt, it can really throw things off. In fact, I think something like there's a study like 80% of people that get a significant windfall give it back in 5 years and wish they never had it, right? Because it actually becomes contrast for them to manage it because they've created a certain belief system around money that's given them a certain amount of money, and to change it significantly quickly can sometimes throw people off and add more contrast. So interesting, huh? So anyway, so Andy in this as a character in this movie needs an even bigger test. So there's a new prisoner that arrives that has basic proof that Andy didn't do it, that he's innocent. And Andy's like, this is great. And he goes to the warden, and because they feel like he's got this understanding, the warden's kind of got this friendly relationship with him now. And he's like, look, I'm probably innocent. I can get out of here. I know I'm innocent and I can probably get out of here. And the warden, immediately being selfish and thinking of himself and thinking about the exposure of his laundering scheme, is like, oh, is that right? Well, boom, here's a month in the hole. And then he kills the prisoner who had that information, and then he gives Andy another month, right? So if you're looking for an excuse to say the law of attraction is bullshit, right? Here are three amazingly powerful doses of contrast, one after another after another. Surely the law of attraction is bullshit, right? And he then will think, yeah, this got me into trouble. I don't believe in it anymore. So it's all, life actually does suck. I'm just a victim. But that's not who he is. He was shaken up for sure because it was rough in the hole, but he was okay, and after that sequence, getting out of the most time in the hole than anybody they had seen, he was still a believer. He still had the sense, and there's a line where he says, I was in the path of a tornado. And so it was, he says it with kind of a chuckle that he just was looking at, so he's actually, we're talking about randomness. Law of attraction would say he attracted the tornado or attracted his way into being in the path. He talks about more sort of a random thing where he was in the path of tornado and it just hit him. In other words, some murderer was in the right, was in a certain place at a certain time and killed the wife, and he just got pinned on it. So it was very unfortunate. But that all was really this contrast that he needed to become the stalwart example of law of attraction that's going to inspire Red and us and everybody, and everybody else. So, but he does acknowledge that, look, I didn't think it would last this long. And I think that's another thing I see coming up in these law of attraction communities is people was like, look, I've been, listening to Abraham Hicks for years, or I've been doing this and that. It's not here yet, right? And I think that, and I get that. I have a compassion for that, and I feel that way myself sometimes. And it's really not so much about time. It's about showing up in the right energy, and it happens when it happens. There's a gestation period that takes as long as it takes, and and if I'm not attached to this sort of time that it takes, the experience itself is better, and B, things tend to come better and more quickly. I believe, and I think that's what uh, Andy is showing up as here. So he didn't expect it would take that long. He was in this place that that he didn't quite choose, right? Or in a sense, he didn't choose it. Um, but his belief is rock solid. And this is where he shares his vision of what's going to happen in the end. And it's this beautiful idea of this blissful life on a Mexican beach. And he's like, I could use a man who knows how to get things. That's how Red first introduced himself. Um, and Red, who thinks he's probably never going to get out of there, but has this idea of, wow, this is probably the best friend I've ever met in my life, and he's going to be in this place, and we'd be free on the beach and sunny, and sounds pretty awesome. And he's coming around, but he's scared, really scared. Well, now that Andy has seen the writing on the wall, that he's basically nothing. He's an innocent man, and there's nothing he can do to really get out. He launches his plan that he's been doing for years. And again, he's this guy, and they set it up really nicely with that letter writing campaign to the state that he's just persistent. So with that freaking rock hammer, for years, he ends up digging out of his cell, brick by brick, and he gets to the outside of he's outside the prison. And what's also awesome, so the very elaborate escape plan. It's really beautifully laid out in the film. And then he goes through the tunnel, the tunnel, the tunnel of waste to get him outside the prison. And then what's also amazing, and I think very much aligned with law of attraction, is when he's out there, the laundering scheme that he did for the warden was basically, it's almost like the 2.0 version of him. He manifested this idea, this fake identity, so that the warden could be funneling money illegally, but then he flips it and he uses that manifestation for himself, and he takes that money and he goes, and that's actually his escape. So it's so beautiful how he had this vision, and then he just turned it around and used it for himself to become that guy that he created. So the synchronicity of that and the manifestation of that, I think, is really powerful and beautiful. But again, he is the leader in this story, right? He's the one that pretty much believed in law of attraction for the most part in the beginning, and believed it all the way through, even through getting significant doses of contrast. What about Red? Well, there's a great sequence of Red going to the parole board several times, and he's saying, "Yes, sir. Yes, sir. This is, I'm rehabilitated. I can, and it's all phony, right? It's phony." By the third time he goes in, after really learning more of his own sense of who he is and his own authenticity and how he is empowered to show up as himself, he tells him from the heart. He says, "Look, there's not a day that goes by that I don't feel bad about the person that I killed." He shows genuine regret, there's a vulnerability there, and it's really powerful. And then he shows amazing empowerment with law of attraction by saying, "And I don't give a shit if you're going to let me out," right? And it's a playful way to say it, but really what that's about is I'm an empowered person, and I'm not attached to outcome. I'm not a victim, and I'm not groveling here for you guys to do it. I'm an empowered person. I'm taking full responsibility for what I did wrong. I've served my time. It's time. And what happens? Source then relents. The energy has shifted for them, and who knows what they were thinking or whatever, but energetically, that's the shift, and boom, he's out. Really awesome. But now we get to that point that was beautifully foreshadowed by that older inmate. He's been so familiar, and he was beloved in the prison. He's a nobody outside, right? So his circumstances have changed. And last time we saw a character whose circumstances changed, that were changed for the better, but they were so unfamiliar he couldn't appreciate and embrace how they were better. So he kills himself. Will Red do the same thing? Has he learned the lessons from Andy about the power we have inside us to create our own reality and find our own power? Um, well, yeah, he has, and it hits us with that great line: uh, "Get busy living or get busy dying." That's damn right. It's really beautiful. To me, that's about the empowerment of showing up. Get busy living. Am I going to show up and be in my power today and be in my awesomeness? Or am I going to be a victim? Uh, and in this moment, our real hero definitively chooses to skip parole and pursue his dream. It's beautiful. So here's an interesting thing about the ending. The book finishes with, and maybe even the word hope, right? It says, I hope that it's something like, I hope the ocean is as blue as it was in my dreams. I hope Andy's there smiling or whatever. I hope, right? Something like that. But he never gets there. And to me, that is law of attraction, right? That obviously we do want to get there, and it's awesome when we get there. But guess what? When we get there, what do? We turn around and we create a new there to go to, right? So the destination matters, but not it's fairly insignificant. It's just someplace to go, and it's the trip that goes there. So the book finishes with this idea beautifully, with him in process, on the road, and hopeful and empowered, right? That to me is the energy. So they tried this in the movie and basically ended with this shot here. And and I think people were kind of intellectually moved by it. And then they tried the one where they actually end in the movie where there's that, reunion on the beach and people flip for it, right? So, look, you got to do it the way, but I feel sad about it because in theory, the whole idea, if you really understand these ideas, you're embracing the process and you don't need the destination to really feel the joy, right? That to me is the win. But in the reality is most of us are like Red in the beginning of the movie. Unless we see the circumstances really overt around us, it's harder for us to feel that deep satisfaction. So, you got to play to your audience. So they play, and I also wasn't crazy about the way the filmmakers did it. It kind of went back to that surreal thing. And maybe that was kind of why I did, but I would have rather a little more grounded approach of him actually meeting each other. I kind of liked the surreal touch in the opera scene, but I wasn't crazy about this ending. But the audience loved it. So yeah. So and this is what that ending looked like, and now I want to circle back to the product itself because there's a really interesting thing that happens here. So you see those two small figures in this image are Andy and Red, or probably stand-ins than the actual real actors, but. This is the time in the movie where often a writer, especially a writer-director, will say, film by so-and-so, right? It's sort of like the signature moment, and it's great. And a lot of times, you love the movie and you're really proud, and the movie's so it's a great time to do it. Frank Darabont chose to do it differently here. He took this moment to say in memory of Alan Greene. So who the heck's Alan Greene? My understanding is that Alan Greene was his agent. And the first agent that really was significant in helping to advance his career early on. And Alan had died, I think, sometime around the making of this movie. But what's really significant here in terms of the themes that we're exploring in Law of Attraction is that to make it in the film business or in life in general, we have to believe in ourselves. We have to say, I have the choice to show up and be empowered and love who I am and be awesome. And part of that is connecting with other people who are like-minded. But when we advance in business, certainly in the film business, it's when somebody else sees a light in you or in me or whatever, and then they get involved, and that's when that advancement happens, right? So it's that collaboration that ends up advancing a career, but it's that inner belief that you have to show up without any attachment to the collaboration ever coming, right? So for Frank Darabont to tip the hat to Alan Greene in this moment is I think really beautiful because it's an acknowledgement of that friendship, of that colleagueship, of that connection to somebody else. He could have said, "Look, this is my movie. It's the best movie I've ever made. It's amazing, and I'm proud of it. And I made this movie, and that's fine to do it that way. But instead, he took that very precious real estate and said, you know what? This guy believed in me at a time when nobody was believing in me, and that means something to me. So to me, from a guy who's in the business, it's a very special choice, and I think it speaks to how this movie is really special to really in every facet, from the production, from what happened to how popular it is because of these principles. It's not an accident that it's so popular. It's because we all deal with this sense of these lack attacks. I don't have what I want. I don't have the relationship, the money, the this, the that. And the more we're able to be like Andy and just be okay with it and be focused on moving forward, the better our life becomes. And the more we, like Red, sort of learn to go, okay, we can have hope, we can have empowerment. And in fact, the more we have it, the better our life becomes. So I invite you to get busy living or get busy dying.